Hey YouTube world, what's going on? Mark here from TST Industries, back in the garage, and behind me I have our all-new 2024 Kawasaki Ninja 500, and in this video I'll be guiding you through the installation process of our TST no-cut frame sliders. Now, with the introduction of the Ninja 500, we did see that the Ninja 400 was discontinued. However, a lot of the parts and the components on the Ninja 500 have been shared from the Ninja 400 platform, and the frame is one of those components. It is almost identical in every way to the Ninja 400. However, with the updated fairings on the Ninja 500, we did have to redesign our frame slider kits in order to prevent our customers from having to cut their fairings. So our no-cut frame slider kit does bolt directly in a fashion that allows you to avoid cutting your fairings. It's a very simple installation process. Our kit is displayed in front of me, and as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward kit. These frame sliders are made of two CNC machined and anodized black mounting brackets. They do include some stainless steel hardware, our aluminum spacers to provide enough clearance and engagement when mounting them to your frame and your motor mounts, and lastly, of course, our delrin frame slider pucks. And these pucks are designed in a way that they are angled. This is purposeful and intentional in order to avoid a completely flat surface from getting snagged on other materials and objects around you if you do find yourself in a crash. Now, with all that said, this installation process is very straightforward, and on our product page, you will be able to find a PDF diagram showing the exploded view of this assembly along with torque specifications for the bolts. But we will walk you through the installation process now and be able to take this bike out for a ride and know that we are protected. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in and begin this installation. Now, to begin this installation process, we do need to remove our fairings and gain access to the motor mount bolts. We will do so by grabbing a 4mm hex key, Allen key, and remove these two upper bolts. These are black bolts, and a nice little tip when working on Kawasaki's is black bolts are always exposed, and the silver, the stainless steel bolts, are usually hidden to secure fairings to the bike. With those two bolts removed, we can remove this upper shroud, and all that's holding that in is this friction fastener and the two push pins. Now with that removed, we can actually remove this stainless steel bolt located and securing this black tank shroud piece. And you can see here, this is what I'm talking about. Kawasaki is very good at doing this. Normally, all the silver bolts are hidden behind fairings and the black bolts are exposed. The only exception to that rule will be these three bolts that we will remove at a later time. Now, with this removed, we do need to gain access and free the rest of this rear supporting fairings. So we're gonna go ahead and remove our seats. And now with the seats removed, we can go ahead and remove these two bolts located here. This is still using the 4 hex bit, hex key, Allen key. And this rearmost one that we just removed does not have a shoulder washer. The two bolts we will remove just here in a second will have shoulder washers. It is important to differentiate them and remember where they go. Before we gain access to that, we do need to remove this bolt located here that is securing the rear shroud to the gas tank mounting bracket, and that is an 8mm socket. And this is one of those bolts that does have a shoulder washer on it. It is a smaller profile shoulder washer. I don't know how well you can see it. Toss that to the side. And now we can pry this black panel forward. We're just going to have some friction fasteners locking it in place. You can see here 1, 2, 3, and 4 friction fasteners all locking into these grommets. Toss this piece to the side. And now we have this bolt here. This is still an 8mm socket. And we're going to grab this other bolt for a comparison. But you can see here, same style bolts. The one we just removed is the longer one. It does go through two different fairing pieces and then a mounting bracket, so it has a much longer shoulder washer on it, whereas the one we removed earlier that supports and secures this rear tail fairing to the gas tank mounting bracket is a smaller profile bolt with a smaller profile shoulder washer. And then the last piece we have here is another 8mm socket. And this one also has a shoulder washer on it. Now we can gently pry outward on this rear fairing mount. All we have is some friction fasteners locking this all in place. Now before we continue this, we do need to free the front of the motorcycle. And for that, we do have some push pin rivets located behind this inner shroud here. We are going to go ahead and remove them now. There's 3 of them. And those push pin rivets look like this. And what we're doing when we remove them and reset them is a push pin rivet, when installed and locked and secured in place, looks like this, completely flat head. In order to remove it, you push down on the head, and that allows this piston to move forward and frees the locking mechanism. Now when you go to reinsert the push pin rivets, you will actually push on the piston from the bottom so that the top of the piston protrudes from the top of the actual rivet body. Then you will insert the rivet into the hole and then press down on the piston head to create a flat surface here, and that is actually what is engaging the locking system and preventing the shrouds and fairings from floating freely about. Now with those 3 push pins removed, we can go ahead and continue removing the fairings from this model. On this surface right here and all the way up to this very frontmost tab, there are some hook locks, and we will show you once we remove. The best way that I have found to remove them is to actually press down on your headlight assembly just enough while prying upward on this surface and on this fairing. And just like that, you will free it. Now, we have to remove these 3 bolts located on the belly pan, and we will also need to disconnect our turn signals. So if you know where the turn signal plug is, this will be very simple for you. If not, I will show you in just a second. But first, let's go ahead and remove these 3 bolts here. And these 3 bolts do all have clear washers on them. Please ensure you do not lose them. They will protect your paint. And all 3 of those bolts are the same length. And now you can see here, we have one more bolt located here. This is another 8mm head. So we can leave our fairings kind of float in there and remove this last bolt. And this does have a large flat washer. Please ensure that you remove that as well. Now, with our fairings removed, I can give you a visual representation of what we did on the front. But you can see here on this upper portion, we do have these hooks here, and they actually interlock with these channels on the headlight fairing. And then we have a couple push pin rivets as well, and those interlock with these 2 grommets located here. Now we will go ahead and disconnect our turn signal, which is located right here, and disconnect the running light function as well. If you did install our Nexus turn signals, you do know that we have the ability to introduce a running light function. We'll go ahead and toss this fairing to the side. Now we will be removing these 2 engine mounting bolts. However, before we get to that, I should disclose we do have our bike in an upright position, not on its kickstand, not leaned over. Furthermore, because we will be removing 2 engine mounting bolts, we need to do them one at a time. And all of this I say because we want to avoid potential engine sag. If you remove both of these bolts at once, there is a very good chance that your engine will sag, and that can potentially turn this into a very expensive project if you don't have the appropriate tools to realign your motor mounts and your engine mounting points. So please heed our warning and our suggestions here. Have your bike in an upright position. If you have the ability to support it from underneath with some sort of center stand that isn't putting pressure on the oil pan or your exhaust system, that is also recommended as well. We've done frame slider installations on hundreds of bikes. 99% of the time, we never see any engine sag. However, we do know that as you ride more, the moment you remove these engine bolts, there is a very good potential that your engine will sag even just a millimeter. So we're gonna go ahead and do this with caution. We have a 14mm socket that will remove these two bolts. And as we remove them, we already have our assembly here, but just so you can see the diagram, we're going to be working with the boomerang shaped bracket. And out of the 4 spacers we include, we will be working with the 2 shorter spacers. Beyond that, you might be able to tell on camera here, but we have put some concentric rings on one side of the spacers. One spacer has 1 ring, and the other spacer has 2 rings. And on the opposite side, one spacer has 3 rings, and then the last spacer has no rings. And those are easy identifiers. Number 1 will go on the back, number 2 will go in the front, and then on the opposite side, 3 will go in the back and 4 will go in the front. So let's go ahead now, remove one of the engine bolts and begin this installation process. Again, this is a 14mm socket. At this point, we will go ahead and grab our frame slider bracket and the smaller spacer with the single ring. And we will feed the ring through, or feed the spacer through the bolt, and then go ahead and begin by hand securing this bolt in place. Now, golden rule that we have here at TST, always start threads by hand. That does prevent cross-threading or potential cross-threading before using any sort of tools. Now, we are not wanting to completely bottom this out, but we want to go ahead and engage enough threads to where when we remove this front engine bolt, the engine does not sag. This is actually locked in place. I cannot pull it out. So now we'll go ahead and remove the front bolt. Now we will grab the second shortest spacer, or the one with 2 rings on it, and line it in place. Feed the bolt through it. Now we'll go ahead and grab our tool. This is going to be in size 8 hex bit or hex key, Allen key, whatever tool you have readily available. And now with both of those bolts bottomed out, we can go ahead and torque them down to the appropriate specification. In this case, that will be 32 foot-pounds. And again, if you reference the diagram we have on our product page, which is a PDF that you can open on your phone or even print, we do have the designation here. All of the engine mounting bolts will be 32 foot-pounds. There we are. And now, with the brackets secured and the bolts torqued to the appropriate specification, we can reassemble the fairings, and the very last step will be to install our frame slider puck to the mounting bracket. Now, with our fairings in hand, ready to be remounted, I do want to highlight the hook features that do have to interlock on the headlight fairing. But in addition to those hooks, we do have this tiny little notch. It is a slide piece that does interlock in this channel right underneath the headlight. If you do not interlock that piece, and it is a little tricky to do so, this pointy piece on the fairing will point outward a little bit. It will not be completely flush. It's important to note that because we have had issues installing it ourselves. It is a very, very small slide. You could barely see it there. And it is at such a steep angle that it really is kind of contradictory to the rest of how this assembles. So please just have patience, massage it well if you have to, work with it. It will fasten correctly. And if that piece doesn't, no harm, no foul. Your fairings will still be secured if you follow the rest of the steps. But just know if you have any misalignment on those pieces, more than likely this tiny little slide right here is the culprit. Now let's go ahead and connect our turn signals again. And now we can start at the top here. We'll actually get this slide piece first, and then every other piece will follow. See? If you get that front piece in first, it is actually pretty easy. And now you just have to make sure that you keep that piece locked in place. And we will do that by engaging some of these push pin and friction fasteners located around the fairings. There we are. Now we can go ahead and secure the belly pan first. We'll grab the 8mm bolt with the larger flat washer, and that will engage on this bottom mount. And a lot of these bolts do go into well nuts. And if you're not familiar with how well nuts work, they're essentially a rubber nut that collapses and mushrooms as you tighten it down. Some of them can feel like the threads will never end. Eventually you will start to feel tension, and then it will be at its maximum flex. And once we secure these bolts in place, I'm actually going to go ahead and we will install the frame slider puck before continuing the reassembly of these fairings. Now that I know this fairing is secured and cannot go anywhere, we've engaged friction fasteners all along. So now we can go ahead and grab our frame slider puck and the two M8 bolts that we include. And this will be a size 6 hex bit. And these pucks are side specific. Our logo is engraved on the puck. It should be pretty easy to identify. And we will torque these bolts down to 16 foot-pounds. And with that, our frame slider kit is installed, torqued down correctly. We will continue the reassembly of the OEM fairing and fairing panels, and then we will hop on over to the other side of the bike and begin the disassembly. With those 3 bolts already secured at the bottom, I will now turn my attention to this inner shroud and reinsert the push pin fasteners we removed. Now, hopping on over to this side, you can see we do have this shoulder washer here and bolt that we removed. Now we'll go ahead and do the larger bolt and shoulder washer. And the final smaller one. That bolt removed, we can reinstall the black fairing shroud that goes here. Now this hook will interlock between these 2 fairings here, and then you can just pivot it so that we interlock with the 3 friction fasteners, like so. Then we will take the stainless bolt we've removed, no washers on this one. This goes into a well nut. And I'm bottoming all these bolts down and then going about another quarter rotation. That ensures that they have some preload and are locked in place. And before we go ahead and install this final piece up here, we have one more bolt, and that will be the silver one that we did remove from here. It is another stainless steel bolt without a washer that is going into a well nut. Now we will grab this black upper shroud and the two black bolts that were included, or that were securing it in place, I should say. And we have one friction fastener here, and then a little hook lock that interlocks on this surface here. And there you have it. This side is now fully secured. We have no leftover hardware, with the exception of our two OEM engine bolts. And we can hop on over to the clutch side, the left side of the bike, and continue this installation. Now with the fairings off, we can go ahead and begin installing our frame sliders by first removing the two OEM engine mounting bolts. There is two things to note when working on this left side of the motorcycle. The belly pan did only have two of the stainless steel bolts with plastic washers, not three like the other side. So that's one thing. And the second thing, which is way more important, is that we have seen on the Ninja 400 in certain world markets, and even here in North America with California model bikes specifically, there is a charcoal canister that is located on the left side of the bike. And that is needed for emissions. If you have inspections or any sort of road approvals, you will need that charcoal canister still installed on the bike. We have designed our bracket in a way that you will be able to secure your charcoal canister if you are in one of those world regions by simply just using some zip ties. We've done that on the Ninja 400. We do talk about that in the Ninja 400 video. The same situation applies for the 500, being that it is essentially the same motor and the same frame. We can safely assume that there is going to be a charcoal canister situation on certain world markets. So please note that before panicking and calling us saying, what do I do about this? We do know this is a situation. We are in Florida. You can see here our model does not have the charcoal canister. It is not something we have to worry about. However, we did design our products with all of our customers in mind, which is why these two extra holes are located on the bracket. Now, with all that said, we can go ahead and remove these bolts. Same process as before, one bolt at a time. These are still the 14mm sockets. Now, it is important to note this bolt and this one as well have two spacers located between the frame and the engine mounting point on the actual engine. So as you remove these bolts, you will have to hold on to a spacer located back here in between the frame and the motor. As to not lose it, we will be reusing those spacers. So bolt and spacer. We can toss the bolt to the side. And with our frame slider kit in hand, I like to start with the rear mount. The rear mount on our frame slider bracket is slotted, so it does give you a little bit of adjustability when trying to make sure everything is nice and tight and lined up appropriately. We'll go ahead and begin this installation. We will grab our aluminum spacer with the 3 rings on it. That is for the rearmost mount. Same process as before. Bolt, bracket, spacer, and now the OEM spacer. And again, we're just trying to catch a few threads here. I feel it. We're in the actual motor now, so I can go ahead and remove the front mount. All right, and again, while holding the spacer, grab our magnet tool, bolt, and spacer. Toss that to the side, grab our other longer bolt for the frame slider kit, and then finally the spacer with no rings on the bottom. We have a few threads of engagement. I'll begin twisting both of these until the forces or the tension is a little too tight, and then we'll go ahead and grab our tool. Again, this is the size 8 hex bit, hex key, Allen key. I'm going to do one bolt at a time, little by little. This is to ensure that we're not cockeyed. All right, and now that we've hit bottom, we can go ahead and grab our torque wrench. Again, set it to 32 foot-pounds. Perfect. With the bracket torqued down correctly, we can go ahead and reassemble the fairings. We will do that now, button this all up, finalize the installation of our frame slider puck, and call it a day. All right, and before we go ahead and install the frame slider puck, let's go ahead and put our seats back on. And now the very final step of this assembly and installation process will be to install our frame slider pucks to the bracket. We will set our torque wrench to 16 foot-pounds. And just like that, this installation is now complete. So as you can see, we have successfully added on crash protection to our all-new Kawasaki Ninja 500. And with the design of our TST frame sliders that accentuate the styling of this machine, it really does bring another level to this installation. And best of all, no modifications were needed, and we have no hardware left behind. So as long as you follow these steps, you should be in the same boat. If you like this video, you want to check out these frame sliders or what other products we may have available for the Ninja 500, please be sure to stop by our website, tstindustries.com. The link to these frame sliders can be found in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to say hey, please be sure to do so in the comment field below. We love to hear from you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's a perfect way to stay up to date with all the new and exciting videos we've got going on. And lastly, feel free to stop by our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all username TST Industries. For now, this has been Mark in the TST Garage. We will catch you next time. Ride safe.